CAC Global Summit 2020, held from June 1st to June 5th. With the theme COVID-19 triggered by climate changes and the consideration of social paradigm shift that followed. A presentation and discussion session was held with Mayor of Seoul, Park Wonsoon, Professor Chun Choe, the Chair Professor of Natural Sciences in Ewha Women's University, and Sir Samuel Stebbins Bowles, the Research Professor of Santa Fe Institute and also the author of The Moral Economy.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I am Huijben, your MC for this session. First of all, I would like to express my gratitude to all of you. These days, environmental issues have become more important than ever. They can no longer be overlooked. So, now let us talk about how climate change will affect the post-COVID era and the ways to solve these problems. Now, let me introduce today's speakers from home and abroad. First of all, we have Professor Choe Chun, Chair Professor of Natural Science at Ewha Women's University. Next, we are joined by Simon Smith, British Ambassador. Please welcome him. We are also joined by Yujin, a Senior Research Fellow at Green Transition Institute. She's well known as an active environmentalist. Next, it is my honor to introduce Park Wonsoon, Mayor of Seoul, who is the host of the CAC Global Summit 2020. Last but not least, it is my great honor to introduce Professor Samuel Bowles. Professor Samuel Bowles is worldwide renowned specialist in behavioral economics, and he is also known as the author of The Moral Economy. Good afternoon, Professor Samuel Bowles.
Hello.
Yes, thank you for being with us today. Before we begin today's session, we would like to have a special congratulatory speech. Let's take a look who has sent us a video.
Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it gives me a great pleasure to speak at the Cities Against the COVID-19 Global Summit. At the outset, I'd like to give my greatest gratitude and thanks to the medical workers around the world who are battling against the COVID-19 on the front lines. I would also like to thank the Honorable Mayor Park Wonsoon of Seoul Metropolitan City for convening this important global summit. Ladies and gentlemen, life as we knew it has changed. It is now the time for us to figure out how to live in a new era of the aftermath of the pandemic. His Holiness Pope Francis has commented that the global pandemic may be one of the nature's responses to the man-made climate crisis. Multiple researches have shown that there is a clear relationship between the worsening of the environment and the outbreak of viral diseases such as COVID-19. The global outbreak of this pandemic is a wake-up call for us to stop sacrificing the environment for the sake of economic growth. We must embrace a new paradigm that aligns economic growth with a sustainable environment. Ladies and gentlemen, the vast scale of the pandemic, as well as the climate crisis, requires united efforts of a global scale. The whole planet must work as one in the face of such a crisis. In particular, I urge developed countries to make an extra effort to support the Global South, which may lack adequate resources and tools. In this era of globalization and connectivity, we must focus key resources and tools to developing countries to truly eradicate COVID-19. With that, dear distinguished participants, I look forward to hearing many eye-opening ways on how to align life in a post-COVID era with climate action. Let us gather wisdom to build a new and sustainable way of life for the present and the future. Let us work together to make this world better for all. Thank you. 감사합니다.
Next, we would like to have Professor Samuel Bowes. Today, Professor will be talking on COVID-19, climate change, and the moral economy. We are looking forward to hearing from him. Professor, are you ready? Please begin your presentation.
Yes, I am. Thank you very much for your introduction. I want to thank also Mr. Mayor for bringing us together here, the people of Seoul and the people of Korea, for all that you've done as an example to the rest of the world. As you can see, I want to talk about the moral economy. What you're looking at is a beautiful, ugly, frightening fresco from the 15th century during the time of those plagues. I hope you can see in the upper right that they are washing their hands as they should. Now, I want to talk about paradigm, a change in paradigm, and I'll be using some words: paradigm, vernacular, narrative. So let me start with narrative. The narrative is basically a way of telling a story about events. Well, I think we are now facing a situation in which similar types of changes in ideology and teaching and language and in policy will take place. COVID-19 and climate change provide an opportunity for a similar shift. Now, let's ask, what can we learn from what we're observing that people are doing? What they chose to feature here was volunteers delivering food. They wanted to emphasize the fact that much of what we have to address now has to do with ethical concerns of solidarity that we've come to realize are so important in addressing COVID-19 and are also essential to addressing climate change. Do we really want to let the market do the job of deciding what's important and what is not? Ethical and generous and solidaristic norms have been essential to addressing the pandemic. Unfortunately, they're absent from economics, or primarily absent. Many think that in the private sector, any kind of power of that nature should be made accountable through democratic procedures, and we should be protected from it. But again, questions like this are not being raised in economics, or at least I should say, they haven't been until very recently. Now, a lot of what we will have learned from the pandemic is surprisingly already part of modern economics if you look at the research that's been done recently. To start with, economists have come to understand that good laws and good incentives are no substitute for good citizens. If the citizens are immoral and self-interested, well, then market incentives and government orders and so on, no matter how cleverly designed they are, they may backfire, and they certainly won't be sufficient to address the challenges of a pandemic. So good citizens are essential. What I call civil society or community, it provides essential elements for a strategy to kill COVID-19 without killing the economy. There are two basic elements. One is private contract and governmental orders are limited. But the good news is socially oriented economic actors and citizens can make up for that and provide alternative spaces in which economic discourse can take place, and also in which we can experiment with new institutions. That space will be one in which we look at and interrogate the private exercise of power and the essential role of social norms. So instead of a line, let's think of a triangle. Now, the triangle is a space, and The poles mean the same thing. So the markets and government are poles of this thing. But now we have a third pole, which is civil society. Any point in this space is a type of institution or rules of the game or set of motivations which combines elements of the three poles. I think this is a reasonable way to look at the alternatives before us. Civil society-led zero net carbon consumption. This is something that people do as a matter of their own morality. They do it as a matter of peer pressure. It's not imposed by governments. It's not incentivized by markets. But let's think further about what we've learned about this new space for policies. But let me say one thing more about the civil society. I've listed their motives, which are essential to this. And look on the left edge of the graph between government and civil society. Virus testing and tracing in South Korea is a marvelous example of combining government with civil society, partly obedience and partly social pressure, partly a swift action by a government, which is then supported avidly by one's neighbors and friends. And I've located throughout the triangle other possible other things that have happened during the paradigm from which we can learn. Now, the coming paradigm shift, which I'm advocating here, many other people, for example, Mark Carney, who just stepped down as the governor of the Bank of England, said, we're not going to get a vaccine against climate change. We can't self-isolate from climate change. And here's an optimistic thing. Every year, I've been asking students around the world, what do you think economics should be about? Thousands and thousands of students have answered this with before they started studying introductory economics. And usually they say inequality. But last year at the University College London, there was a big shift. The word cloud there tells you that the students of today are asking us, the intellectuals, the social scientists, the biologists and so on, they really, really want us to focus on this as part of what they are going to learn. And we owe it to the young people today to change what we're teaching as part of changing our vernacular as the foundation of a new paradigm. I want to thank you all, and I congratulate the people of Korea and of Seoul for the wonderful example you've given for the world. Thank you very much.
And now, Professor Chun will give us a presentation on a time for ecological turn. Please welcome him.
Hello. COVID-19. This is absolutely unprecedented event. Nearly anyone living alive at the moment has ever seen this kind of thing before in their entire lives. This is, I believe, a time for ecological turn. Now, climate change is another pandemic crisis, just like COVID-19. We need to do an ecological turn. We had experienced linguistic turn, cultural turn, and people are talking about informational turn, technological turn, all kinds of things. But in my opinion, all other turns are not that important because our very own existence on this planet is threatened. So in this era, we need to really embrace ecological turn. So I suggest that we even change our scientific name from Homo sapiens to Homo symbios, the ones who are willing to live together with other animals, plants, and even other human beings. Let me add one more thing at this point. We've been using the expression environment-friendly quite often these days. Environment-friendly industries, environmental-friendly government, and all that. But now I think back, this expression is a mere excuse. We haven't done much. We did business as usual, and then we're saying, we're not that bad. We're trying to be environment-friendly. Now, In the post-COVID era, I don't think we will be satisfied with this expression. We will be looking at which companies are eco-centered. We'll be looking at who is eco-centered behaving people. What government is eco-centered? Whatever they do, they want to keep eco right in the middle of their policies and their activities. And consumers will have a bright eyes to look for these kind of things from now on. And we'll ask a question, something like this. Would that company contribute to the next pandemic? I don't want to buy the products from that company if that company is contributing to another pandemic. We need to do ecological turn. Thank you.
Thank you for your insightful speech. So we should recognize the seriousness of climate change to prevent the contagious disease. Next, it is my honor to invite Mayor Wonsoon for giving us a presentation on Seoul's vision against climate crisis. Mayor Park, please begin your presentation.
Thank you very much. Good morning. I'm Wonsoon Park, Mayor of Seoul. So, as humankind was forced to cease its excessive activities due to the pandemic, the Earth has been recovering to its original self. This paradox of the Earth clearly shows a direction that all humankind must head to in post-corona era. That is to say, one step forward toward a new future by overcoming the climate crisis. So we need to transform the urban operating system into a decarbonized version and create sustainable industries and jobs that do not create much carbon. So even before COVID-19, Seoul has already taken one step ahead in infectious disease response. So under the slogan of citizens are the energy for the past 8 years, Seoul has taken the lead in responding to climate change, strengthening solidarity and cooperation both home and abroad. In addition to as quarantine, Seoul will set the standard model for cities around the world and attracts active participation in climate change measures. So first, Seoul will build green buildings across the city. Seoul will improve energy efficiency through expanding the mandatory zero energy buildings in public building and large-scale green remodeling. Second, Seoul will open the green mobility era beyond pedestrian-friendly city. Seoul will expand the walking space for pedestrians by adjusting space for roads. Third, Seoul will enhance the role of parks as a safe green shelter. Seoul will ensure all urban park plans, which are long pending, are implemented in order to preserve forests and gardens within the city. Together with our citizens, Seoul will plant 30 million trees by 2022. As Professor Samuel Bowles mentioned earlier, I fully agree with the theory of the moral economy, where penalties and incentives for self-interested people would prevent voluntary behavior and cause competitive inequalities. Citizens need to be energy for change. Seoul is citizen-oriented city, where citizens participate in the entire governance process from policy planning to evaluations. The Green New Deal of Seoul will be designed to allow citizens to voluntarily participate in efforts to overcome the climate crisis. So COVID-19 is a timely warning to us, signaling that the climate crisis is threatening humankind today and not in a distant future. So as history has shown us, crises also bring opportunities to reshape the existing order. In this crisis induced by COVID-19, now is the last opportunity to go decarbonized. With a desperate aspiration to protect the right to life for the future generations, Seoul will re-establish itself as the global standard environment city. Along with our citizens, Seoul will cooperate with the international community in taking a fast, solid step forward. Thank you very much.
Next, the second APEC. This session will be led by Professor Choe Chun under the theme of environmental transformation in the post-COVID era. Please begin the discussion. Thank you.
Paradoxically, the COVID-19 pandemic has raised much needed concerns over climate crisis. Now, as you heard, Professor Bowles very boldly calls for moral economy, a huge paradigm shift in economics and economy, I guess. With this in mind, let me begin our discussion with some emphasis on green recovery.
We in the UK are absolutely convinced that when we talk about recovery, it has to be a green recovery. When people are looking ahead at what to do after COVID-19, there will be lots of talk about getting back to business. But this cannot be getting back to the path that we were on before, because that path was a path that leads to disaster. We should no longer be investing in technologies that do not have a future. We should no longer be investing in technologies that will destroy our livelihoods and our planet and will impact especially on poorer communities across the world.
Let me now talk about our situation in Korea. Dr. Lee, as you know, the Korean government has just announced that it will implement Green New Deal policy as well. Could this be a turning point for us? How would you evaluate Korean-style New Deal?
Yeah. The South Korean government have been working on plans and policies to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. I also participated every time, but has never achieved. We didn't achieve the reduction goals. About existing, we have to have a institutional reform on existing subsidies, tax system, and prices. These are all based on fossil energy. So it is very important to uphold the principle of just transition. As Mayor Park mentioned, we have to, no person and no place is left behind. We need to make government and enterprises to take responsibilities in addressing climate change and social inequality issue. Yeah.
Every interested or each different authorities had their own duty to change and to transform from the carbon society to more ecological society. So, of course, the city government have the mission to reduce the carbon emissions drastically in post-corona era. But I think, as you emphasized, the most important thing is to mobilize the citizens' power to engage and to participate in this effort, to transform. So my vision is to invite every citizens.
Now we should really apply to climate crisis situation. We should get smarter on this issue. And I hope we had a great discussion. I hope we learn something from this activity. And thank you very much for your participation. Thank you, Professor Bowles. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.